I'd like to call to order the Monday, October 1st, 2018 meeting of the Monona City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Groupie.
Here.
Alder Moore.
Here.
Alder Spate.
Here.
Alder Wood will be arriving. Alder Kitzler.
Here.
Alder Coor.
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the September 17th meeting?
So moved. Second.
Any corrections or additions? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We have one appearance, I know, by Dan Olson from the school district. Is there anyone else here to make an appearance? Okay, then Dan, why don't you come up to the podium?
Well, thank you for having me here this evening. And what I'd like to do is take a little bit of time tonight and talk about the upcoming school referendum that's on the November 6th ballot. And we have a presentation that we have been giving to various community groups. I won't go through that entire piece, and I know you have a long agenda, but we do have some slides. We'll hit a couple of the highlights, and more importantly, I want to make sure that we can answer any questions that you have as city representatives, and to make sure you completely understand all the various aspects of the referendum, how it affects your constituency, as well, of course, with our entire school district. So with that, if you don't mind, I'll just take a few minutes and go through some of the key slides, a little bit of the background information, and then we can open it up to any questions that you may have. So. Okay. Well, until we get the slides up, I'll go ahead and there we go. Okay. Okay, so we talk about our facilities. Clearly, anytime we have budget challenges, there's always a challenge to look at our capital needs, our facilities needs versus, our funding that directly impacts the classroom and our educational programming. And so most often that always has to be the first priority. And because of that, when you have to make decisions, it leads to some various challenges with our facilities. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about what those challenges are, and then what the process we've done to look at those, and then finally what the solution was that's brought forward for the referendum. So ultimately, the three challenges that we faced can be broken down to three main categories of priorities: how to handle our enrollment growth that we have seen and project to continue to see, looking at safety and security in all of our buildings. We've spent a lot, the district has invested a lot to make our buildings safer, but there's always more that can be done. And then lastly, maintenance. We have a significant amount of deferred maintenance that really needs to be addressed. And so those are the three aspects of the facilities needs. When we look at the enrollment, just the big picture, we know that over the last 10 years, we've had enrollment growth of just over 500 students. We project it to be to grow approximately another 700 over the next 10 years. And so won't get into all the detail of where that's at, but that's the big picture of the enrollment pattern that we're seeing. And most importantly, when we look at this enrollment growth, we're really projecting needs for our resident students. We know that we have a fair number of open enrollment student applications every year. We have some open enrollment students. We can manage that, but we needed a plan to make sure that we accommodate our resident growth first and foremost. So the three buildings that have the highest needs right now and into the very near future are our three buildings that are located in Cottage Grove. Taylor Prairie, which is our primary building, is expected to be over capacity looking as soon as next year. Following year, Glacial Drumlin School, and then Cottage Grove School. So all three of those are expected to be over capacity in the next 5 years. Winnequa, we've seen a little bit of resident or student growth, I should say, within the city of Monona and our Winnequa, but we're able to manage that. We still believe that for the distant future that we'll be able to manage our space needs at Winnequa. Likewise, with the high school, when we look at those projections, The further out you go, of course, the less reliable the data is, but we're thinking 10 to 15 years probably before we have based on the current growth projections, before we have space needs at the high school. So it's really the K-8 buildings, middle school, and then the elementary schools in Cottage Grove that have the most significant needs. So we talked about safety, security. This is just one example when we talk about improving the security. So these are 3 pictures at Winnequa entrance. And so those of you who are familiar with the building, the first picture shows the view from our receptionist out into the vestibule, where we do have a secure entrance and that visitors do need to be buzzed in. But then once the visitors enter, they're into the hallway, and certainly we have a vision, with those visitors. We'd like them to come into the office, but the ideal situation is visitors go directly into the office area, so they can be greeted and whatever their needs might be. And that's the situation we have in all of our other district buildings. Winnequa is the lone building that doesn't have that. I should say there's 2 of them. And second is MG21, our old Nichols School that is being utilized by MG21. And so both of those, part of this plan is to increase the security and have a secure entrance right into the office. So we talk about the deferred maintenance. Capital maintenance, the vast majority of the needs are at Winnequa School here in Monona. Just over $8 million of deferred maintenance. Now we're talking about plumbing issues, HVAC, windows, roofs, a little bit of everything. And so the total dollar cost to bring all those things up to where we'd like to have them is just over $8 million. Overall, for all district buildings is just over $14 million, about $14.8 million in deferred maintenance costs. So that, again, is one of the priority needs we're looking at. This is just a couple pictures of some of those challenges. We talk about the windows. We unfortunately had a mold issue right before school started. Fortunately, we caught it early enough. We had are able to get people in and mitigate it, and so everything was fine and tested before school started. But part of that was due to a failing HVAC system, which has been fixed, but it's again something that we need a replacement. So real briefly, the process. How do we come up with the plan moving forward? So we've actually gone back to 2015 where we had an initial facility study completed as well as enrollment studies. And then from that initial work in 2015, we had all this data. We put together a facilities advisory committee then in 2017 to really come up with proposed solutions to those 3 challenges we talked about: growth, maintenance, and safety and security. So on that facilities advisory committee, we made sure that we had representation from both communities in Monona and Cottage Grove. Mayor O'Connor was one of the folks that were on our committee, and I think they did an excellent job of analyzing that data, putting together preliminary recommendations. We did a community survey, got the data back, and then ultimately made a final recommendation. So the purpose of the survey was to really test that preliminary recommendation of the committee. Based on the feedback coming back from that survey, the final plan, again, looked at the priorities. So there definitely was support based on the survey to pursue a referendum. With that, to build a new elementary school in Cottage Grove to handle the projected growth, and then prioritize maintenance and security. So the specifics of that solution: the total facilities cost of $57 million. Now, the original needs that were identified by the committee actually totaled about $87 million. Based on the survey and the priorities, the committee got that down to 57 of the highest priority. And then, that accounts for the costs that we just talked about. And then secondly, will be a second question on the ballot for operations, and that would be to operate the new school. Anytime you bring a new school online, you have new utilities costs, staffing costs with building and grounds, maintenance and administration, and so on. And so that's the second question. And as you're probably aware, with the most recent election laws in Wisconsin for referendum, school districts are limited to 2 questions per calendar year. And these are 2 different types of funding, so they have to be in separate questions. So for the facilities, it's authorizing the school board to issue bonds, essentially borrow, to do the facilities work. And then the second question is authorizing the board to increase their operating budget or the revenue by that $930,000 per year. We have, based on the revenue limits that we have in place. So this chart just shows a little bit different breakdown of that $57 million by building. You notice Winnicott School is just over 10 million. I mentioned that there was a little bit over 8 million in deferred maintenance costs. Okay, the remaining amount is for some renovations to the learning spaces. For example, the library. Over the years, we've had computer labs connected to the library. Those are obsolete now. Everything we have is wireless, and so there's some work that can be done to renovate those spaces to make it, more optimal, and a couple other areas in the building. So the grade configuration, the other key, and really the key point about why did we settle on and recommend a new school for grades 3 through 5 in Cottage Grove, really it had to do with educational solutions as much as the building and growth, that we really felt it was important that all K through, or 4K through 5 students were in an elementary setting. So currently our 5th graders who reside in Cottage Grove actually attend at the middle school at Glacial Drumlin, and so this would get all of our 4K through 5 at elementary, and in Cottage Grove schools continuing the pattern, or the what we have right now with transitioning between buildings. So that's what the configuration would look like. And then a very important piece, of course, what is the tax impact? So for the first question on the facilities, okay, this would be the maximum increase now of $29 per $100,000 of fair market property value. And then from there, of course, you can do the math for 200 or 300 beyond that. And the second question for the operational would be an additional $46 per $100,000 of fair market value. Now, but real quickly, when you look at that, we said the 50, I guess I didn't mention, but the facilities part, generally we do 20-year bonds, and so you're paying back over a 20-year period. By doing the short math, you can see the $57 million is more money than the operational on an annual basis. How could the cost be less? Well, we actually have some debt falling off, and that's one of the reasons for the timing of this. Our high school is just in its 20th year, and so the last debt payment on the high school will be next year, and so that's the result of that number being lower, and then the operation will be an addition on top of that. And then the timeline, if the referendum were to pass, is actually about a full year of design work, bidding, before we actually break ground. Now, some of those maintenance projects, of course, could be done right away that first summer, but anything that requires design, we really would take a full year, and then the following summer to do that. So with the new school and everything else being completed, it would be the fall of 2021. That also plays into the question of why now. That would really give it 3 years to bring that new school online. Again, with projected growth, it will allow us to have that before we really do reach that critical stage of overcapacity and having to put students in spaces that they weren't really designed for. So I think ultimately the committee came up with a very responsible plan to address those needs, but really prioritize the most high priority needs. And then moving forward, again, this was just kind of the short, version, but as far as trying to inform the community, to make sure we have everyone informed when they go to the polls, we've done a number of presentations. We have 2 open houses coming up next week at Winnicott School, next Monday, next Tuesday at Cottage Grove School, as well as a number of other events that will, we've had some, small coffee talks. We're calling Donuts with Dan. We have print materials that have been mailed out, tons of stuff on our website, e-newsletters, and so on. Okay, so that's the big picture overview, but I'll stop there. And also Jared Rosing, our Director of Business Services, is here that can answer any detailed questions you might have budget related that I can't answer, as well as Katie Burns-Kaiser, Director of Communications, who's been working on this plan with us. So take any questions or comments.
Questions, anyone?
I just have a question. There was just an article within the last couple of weeks in the Herald regarding this, and specifically regarding previous projections or statements that were made by the schools that this would not be needed, that the last referendum would be the last for years to come, essentially, because we know that a lot of community members don't get the Heralds or may not be as dialed into this. Could you just address that?
Sure, great question. So we had the original study done in 2015. So at that point, we understood what we had the original enrollment projections. We knew that we were going to have an issue that needed to be addressed in the near future. We hadn't got to the point of determining exactly when that might be. And then the operational referendum came along in 2016, and that was based upon the the budget, the state budget that was passed that year and our funding formula, we felt the need to, do that. So during that time, I guess I can't speak for what some individuals might have said. Really at that time, it was uncertain. We knew that there was going to be a facilities need in the future. We hadn't pinpointed the exact time. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think one thing I had read was it's, school board members said for at least for 5 years. I saw a 5-year reference, so,
Okay.
which is just
Yeah.
about.
and that's not something that actually had come from the committee. There was no
Yeah.
timeline actually, determined.
Alderwood?
Just to follow up on that, do you know when the last capital referendum was?
Yes, so in Glacial Gentleman School opened in 2008, so I believe it would have been 2006, would have been the last capital referendum. Is that accurate? Okay.
Okay. And then with regard to this, the operating referendum, that then builds on your base going forward? It's a permanent,
Correct, that'd be a recurring meeting, yeah, moving forward.
just like the one in 2016?
Yeah,
Also?
the one in 2016 actually sunsets after 5 years.
Oh,
And so
okay.
at that point, the board will need to revisit whether or not to, ask for renewal of that or not, or for the same amount.
But this operating referendum does not sunset?
Correct.
Okay. And then one last question. You mentioned you had to split the questions. So what would you do, or what would you think the message would be if, say, the building passed and the operating didn't? Or
Yeah, great question. And so if the facilities portion were to pass, it'd be very difficult to open a new school without that operating piece. And so the board would be faced with a couple options to consider. One would be, is there any way possible we could fund it out of our current operating budget? That would really mean, moving money from somewhere else. Under the current budget situation, I would say that would not be feasible, but we would have to examine, that. And then the second option would be to try, have another referendum. So you could go to referendum again next spring and try to ask a question, an operating question, whether it be for that same amount or a different amount as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah. Alder Groupie?
So you're projecting significant growth over the next 10 years, and this will be completed, you predict, in fall of 2021. So do you predict that you will have projected growth that will go beyond what your facilities can accommodate now? And if so, what are your temporary solutions or plans for accommodating that growth?
Yeah, great question. So right now, fortunately, the enrollment is trending on the low side. When we have our projections done, they're given a range, from a low end to a high end. And so the last 2 years, we've trended on the low end. So that would be the hope. If all of a sudden it picks up, I'll give you an example. At Taylor Prairie School right now, in kindergarten and first grade, we have 8 sections for each of those grades. That building, every classroom is being utilized. So if we were to get to the point, the next couple, before the building was done, and we would need a 9th section, it would mean probably displacing another, to create a classroom, perhaps a special education classroom or some other thing that's being used to temporarily accommodate that class, or the other option, which would not be optimal, is increased class size, which would, to me, be a last resort. So, that's one that's going to be close as to the timing, whether we'd need that 9th section or not. Keep our fingers crossed that we wouldn't before the building is built.
Anyone else? No? Well, thank you, Dan.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your time. And afterwards, if other questions, comments come up, please feel free to contact us.
And I think your open house in Monona is next Monday.
It is,
that right,
yes.
at 1
At 1
o'clock?
o'clock.
At 6? Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, just one more thing before I proceed. I guess I can put this under appearances. I just received a letter from the city of Sun Prairie that I just wanted to share with everyone. Dear Mayor O'Connor, we are writing to express the city of Sun Prairie's appreciation for the amazing response of the city of Monona on Tuesday, July 10th, 2018. The city of Monona assisted our community during the incident on Tuesday evening and stood with us in the days afterward. We cannot thank the city of Monona enough for your assistance. Our community is fortunate to have partners such as your organization to assist us during difficult times. We also want to specifically mention the actions of one of your staff members, Fire Chief Scott Sullivan, who displayed excellent leadership throughout the incident and assisted our community in managing this difficult situation. Thank you again for your commitment to assisting communities in need and for the service that was provided to our community. And it's signed by the mayor, the city administrator, the police, fire, and EMS chiefs of the city of Sun Prairie. So I will be sharing this with Scott, but I know we were there for quite a while, I think, after the explosion in Sun Prairie, and for a few days afterwards, too, so. Okay, move on to our regular agenda. There is no public hearing. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. We have no unfinished business under new business, item 2A, consideration of resolution 18-10-2298, authorizing the issuance of $4.9 million in general obligation promissory notes and the issuance and sale of $4.9 million note anticipation notes, Series 2018D, in anticipation thereof, put forth by the Finance Director, and this is, there's a request for immediate action. So is there a motion to take this out of order?
Move to
Take it.
suspend the rules and take this out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mark, did you want to talk a little first?
Yeah, before
or
Jeff gets up
before
there to
Jeff
talk.
gets
This is a $4.9 million band. It's on page 19 of your packets, kind of just describes what all this is for. This is basically all for TIF 9, for the street projects and the park engineering, and a couple other things on top of that to get capitalized interest to get to 4.9. Just one thing I had mentioned before, with this and a couple other borrowings before, we will have met our requirement for our developers agreement after this borrowing here.
Okay. Mr. Belanger.
Can I just follow up on a question from
Mhm.
Mark? So is this borrowing include the money that's in the capital budget tonight
No,
for, okay,
none of this stuff is related to the stuff in the budget.
right, okay.
This is just for what we're doing this fall,
But I
right?
mean, as far as Riverfront goes,
Yeah, this does not include what's in,
does not.
we're not borrowing what's
That's
in.
what I thought, but okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity. We were here last month. We delayed this particular portion of the financing primarily because we wanted to wait to get a more accurate bid on the project. So with that, we have for you tonight some note anticipation notes. These are, of course, a typical instrument that is used for tax incremental financing. The one thing we don't want to do is put out long-term debt and not be able to cash flow it outside the general fund tax levy. So TIDs work a little differently, as you know. They're heavily weighted on one end of expenditures and revenues on the far end. So this particular issue matches, in terms of its maturity date and call features, an issue we did back in 17, which basically started the infrastructure improvements in TID 9. You have before you a 4-page handout. The first page is the front cover of the preliminary official statement for this particular issue. You will see that it's rated AA stable. Keep in mind our long-term rating here is a AA1 or AA plus, since it's Standard & Poor's. These, of course, are not general obligation promises, and as I teased Doug last time when he had the question about note anticipation notes, I think it's the most flimsy excuse a municipal government can offer to a bondholder, yet they sell incredibly well. And I say that a bit tongue-in-cheek and a little bit in jest, but for us in Wisconsin, issuers, we're pretty frugal people, and our debt's very highly rated and well received around the United States. So we're very fortunate that when we say we're going to do something in the future, a lot of the bondholders say, okay, fine, they said they were going to, and we certainly believe they are. This particular issue matures on September 1st of 2022. It matches the November 17 issue, which also matures on the same day. Same projects, basically. Some were for TID 8 in that previous issue. We have a yield of a 2.32%. For those of you who've been through a few recent financing, that sounds like a high rate. When I look back at some of the capital projects we've done over the last 5-6 years, we've had all-in costs at under 2%. I hate to tell you that those days are gone for a while, but we're probably not likely to see 10-year paper, coming in at under 2%, all costs included. But we did have a great run in terms of infrastructure improvements throughout the last 10 to 15 years. This issue was also purchased at premium, so you'll be receiving not only the $4.9 million, which includes capitalized interest for the first 2.5 years on this issue. Also very typical under a tax incremental financing where we're not levying a tax and we're basically betting on the development and the improvements to increase that base value, and then we collect, of course, all of those tax revenues that are generated to pay our debt service and improvements. When that's all done, we turn it over to all the other taxing districts. Sometimes the schools don't like that because it adds a lot of value to their cost per member, and their state aid goes the other way. So Tom can attest to that, I'm sure, having worked through budgets with the state. And so we'll try to keep this one going for you for a while. And probably when you're ready to do the high school again, you'll have a lot more valuation to spread that new debt over. Always good to work hand in hand with those kinds of things. But again, we have a premium a bid on this of $23,079, which will also be delivered to the city at the closing. All in all, a fairly nice issue. If you take a look at the second page, I included it. It's the final cover of the final official statement for the $4.19 million that we did, or sorry, $4,160,000. My old eyes. September 1. The vast majority of that maturity in 2022 is for TID 9. The previous maturities of $100,000 each, those are being paid for by cash flows out of TID 8. Okay? There's a method to our madness, of course. They're going to mature at the same time. They're callable at the same time. We'll be able to entertain both of these issues and a subsequent issue for projects that Doug just questioned relative to the budget for TID 9 to finish it up, all at the same time, and all when we have a substantial increment flowing to pay the debt service. Okay? If you turn the page, here's a AA rated lacrosse issue. And these are AA1. So they would actually match our long term. These are Moody's AA1, which sells exactly the same as the Standard & Poor's AA+. If I can direct you, and I put a little scratch there for the maturity of 2022. These matured in April 1. Remember, ours are September. So if my math is good, that's 5 months longer. In a perfect world, you'd expect to get a little bit higher rate in 5 months. Think of a CD. You get a 1 month CD or a 6 month. The bank better be giving you a better rate of return on a 6 month than the 1 month. Risk over time. You can see that those were a yield of a 2.250. Now, this was done back on the 20th of September. On the 26th, the Federal Reserve System bumped the discount rate 25 basis points. So we are 0.07% off of that if we were making a comparison. It's not obviously in the same market, and it's one grade up. This is a GO pledge AA1. Remember, we're not pledging a GO, so we have a AA. Fine, wonderful rating on these bands. Don't misunderstand me. Outstanding. And when you take into account the fact that different market and we're 5 months longer, 7 basis points, I can eat that. Based on where we are today versus where we were the 20th. More importantly, if you turn the next page, the last page, this was on the 25th, the day before the feds moved. We bought this issue out of the market. It's the Milwaukee Area Technical Schools. They're a AA1. They have a 6/1 maturity, 3 months shorter than ours, and they're at 2.30%. So we're 0.02% off of that particular sale in a little bit different market, and at a time after the feds bumped the discount rate 25 basis points. So, I'll make this statement. We really sold your securities at a AA1 level today. Not the AA we got for the rating, but it's typical of Monona. As I said to you before, we worked with you since 2003 and moving that credit rating up from an A to our wonderful AA+. People like to buy your bonds, and of course, we know who likes to buy them, so they're chomping at the bit usually to try to get some of them. So happy to be able to bring these results to you. Certainly want to thank Mark and staff. I've had a wonderful opportunity to work with Mark for quite a few years now. He was just a young guy, and his hair was still jet black when I first met him. I can tease a little. He still has all of his. I don't. But anyway, he did a super job and always does with the rating calls and getting us prepped for our ratings. So thanks, Mark. I really do appreciate all your help. Any questions?
I just got one comment. Jeff talked about this. We're in a ban right now. We will probably refinance this early, just so you know. The way it works with the TIF, the project will get full increment for 2021. We also have our developers agreement, which they have to make a minimum amount, which will start in 2021. So I'm assuming by 2021, we'll be able to restructure this loan and go into long-term debt, start paying that down. So that will be the plan.
Well, that's an excellent point, Mark, and I always want to give us a little what-if kind of time. So when you look at adding a year, yeah, we could say if we're absolutely sure in 21, we've got the ability to do it, we've got the ability to get away, get out of these in 20. But if it doesn't, and some unforeseen things happen in terms of delaying that increment to a level where we'd like to see it, we aren't forced. Nobody's forcing our hand to get out of these securities before we want to. As always, it's like I got to vote here. I apologize. I know I don't vote, but I feel like I live here. But so we can get out of them when we need to. So Mark brings up a good point. We're anticipating we'll move these into longer term debt sooner than the actual maturity date, but if we don't, we have the flexibility to wait until we're ready. Good point. Questions?
Kitzler?
Having each of these come due at the same time, is that putting us at any risk at that point, having a greater kind of callable fund, or, I mean, are there any risks to it, or?
Great question. It's always about risk when you're financing. I don't care what you have to look at. Interest rate risk, market change risk, legislative risk in terms of what might happen. As you know, the recent tax changes really altered some of the buying habits of banks because they're now being treated differently in terms of their income as far as their federal tax liability is concerned. So that's an incredibly good question. We always want to try to manage that risk, and I always have said that I want the most flexibility in a financing instrument for my client that I can get, because I'm pretty good at what I do, but I can't predict the future. And so the risk would be market at the time. We're going to be at whatever the short end of that yield curve is again. And I always like to take advantage of the short end of the yield curve because it does save you millions of dollars. When I looked at the previous slides that the school district showed, $57 million. That thing's financed wrong. It's going to cost them a lot of money. I'm not saying it would be, but I'm just saying those amounts of money, you have to be really careful in terms of your long-term risk. I'm sure it'll be handled quite well. But the point is, when we're looking at our $4-some million, yeah, we do have some risk to whatever the market's going to be. But we also have flexibility to stay at the short end of the yield curve. You know, I've been around this business for 38 years. And as I told some of you last time, I think, I saw treasury rates, 10-year treasury rates that were over 15%. In mortgages at 17 and 18%. Tom doesn't remember that. He's way too young for that time. But that would have been 1983, and they called it stagflation. We had stagnation and inflation. And, you know, for us who were looking at buying mortgages at that time, got to be a little expensive, and we didn't. We went short term, or you should have gone short term. So to answer your question is yes, there is market risk for sure. I don't believe that we're going to see the kind of rates we had in the early 80s. I think those days really are gone, and it's evident that you can rely on 30-some years of 35 years of experience that the feds have handled their policies quite well in terms of controlling the money supply and controlling inflation. So I don't worry too much about that. And as long as we maintain this credit rating, there's no way you're not going to be treated extremely well in any credit rate market relative to other buyers that are, relative to others who are selling debt. So a long answer to, no, I'm not worried about it. But it's a great question, and we'll be in position to take advantage of the market whenever we can. And, like our other tax incremental projects that we've done, very well supported, and they're cash flowing, and that's important. A lot of TIF districts in the state of Wisconsin are underwater because they were done wrong to begin with. And we don't have any of those. And it happened obviously after 2008 and speculation that, these increments were going to continue to grow because valuations were going to drive them higher and higher, and the debt service wasn't put into place properly. And so they didn't have the flexibility. But I wanted to give you your 5 cents. It's a great question. It's a second great question you had tonight, once on finance. I really appreciate. But yes, there is that risk, and that's what you should be asking, because I'm sure other council members have that same question. What's our risk in these kinds of things? It's always my question, because in working to get this credit rating of the city where it is, anytime we look at projects financings, from whether it be Garden Circle or tax incremental difference, riverfront, those kinds of things, we're not a huge city. We don't have endless valuation and incredibly diversified tax base. So we work within the constraints of the city of Monona. It's a wonderful place to live. It's a great corporation for you guys to run, but you can't go into it lightly. And when we look at projects, I first and foremost look at how is it going to affect our credit. Good question.
Anyone else? This was approved at Finance and Personnel. Okay. Hearing no other questions, will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Coor,
Aye.
Alder Groupie,
Aye.
Alder Moore,
Aye.
Alder Spate,
Aye.
Alder Wood,
Aye.
Alder Kitzler.
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Item 2B, consideration of resolution 18-10-2304, approving the 2019-2023 capital improvements program and 2019 capital borrowing, put forth by the mayor. I think we'll just look at each of these amendments, or individually, and we aren't voting on these tonight, just to see if you have any questions. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, number one is, let's see, an addition of $3,000 to the budgeted amount to upgrade the dispatch radio system, and this would be to add a battery backup. So Alders Groupie and Coor. Would you like to talk about this, Alder Coor?
So we'd already included within the budget the radio system upgrade, but when we put forth a budget, we didn't include a backup battery system. Do you want to talk more about this? You know this better than I do.
Okay, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Yes, it's headed here as a dispatch radio system upgrade, but this is actually the microwave system that's going to replace the copper wire that currently connects the Southtown receiver, the transmitter at the water tower, and the receiver at the City Hall. So when it came up for discussion, I believe it was Alder Spate said, well, what if the power goes out, and do you have a UPS backup? No, we didn't even think of that. So $3,000 will be enough to buy 3 UPS backups for this system.
Okay. Any questions? Mark, did you?
Just for our meeting today, does this budget amendment decrease on our operating costs? Was that for our service contracts? Not the budget amendment, but the actual radio system upgrade.
The upgrade was it's $35,000 to have General Communications, or if there's another vendor, install this microwave system that's going to replace the current AT&T hard wires, because AT&T is trying to get out of the business of providing connections of this type.
Okay.
So
So-
basically, you have microwave antennas that
Right,
would be
I just-
installed at 3 different locations that will transmit the signals for Public Works radio and Fire Department radio systems.
Yeah, I thought today we were talking that this might reduce some operating costs with the service.
Oh, what will happen, is if this goes in place, then the current fees, I think we had budgeted like $5,000 a year. those could go away as far as paying those fees to AT&T. So, sorry, I didn't hear you correctly.
You make a note of that.
Yeah, I just meant,
Anyone else? Okay, budget amendment 1902 would add $8,000 for the police entry door. This was something I've been confused about. I thought we were paying for that out of this year's budget, but
That
we're
was
paying
the-
for something else. That was originally talked about, but now we're paying for
yes,
something
this
else.
is, the reason the fire department doors were gonna be paid out of this
Okay.
year. This, I didn't realize that you had already talked to April about this, so I didn't put it in the budget, because I wasn't aware that you guys had talked about putting it in there, so that was the difference.
So if you want to talk about that.
Sure. We have basically two metal doors that one comes in through the garage area and one comes in the upper level through the parking lot. The one by the parking lot's used on a daily basis. We've had a door company actually come out and replace the frames, but basically the doors are warped and they're old. And it depends on how the sun hits them and how they're adjusted, as if they'll close or not. So it's become sort of a security issue because sometimes the door will close and sometimes it won't close all the way. And then sometimes when it is closed, instead of just using their electronic keys to swipe and get in, they have to swipe it and then kind of push and shake to pull them open. So it's time for these doors to be replaced.
Any questions? Okay, let's move on to Amendment 3, which is increasing money to what is in the budget for the library carpet replacement. Ryan, do you want to put forth by Alder Group B?
Hello, everyone. So this capital improvement project would be replacing the upper level carpets in the library. It also includes, well, sorry, the amendment to this is to that project. The amendment is due to the cost. Originally, I was quoted between 10 to 12,000 for the moving of the books and shelves to clear the way so the carpets could be replaced. Then they came back with a higher quote. They miscalculated how many book carts they needed to rent and also the time that it would take to do all this. The difference, I believe, is like 5,000 change. So that is why this amendment is put forth. Does anyone have any questions? Just a quick add, I mentioned this during the committee of the whole, why maybe someone asked me, I can't remember who, why you have library staff, why are they not doing it? It'd be a lot of heavy work. We don't have the equipment to move the shelves. It would take much longer time. The library would be closed probably around 2 to 3 weeks if we did that. And also there was a past incident a few years ago with a staff member being injured moving some of the shelves, and I would like to not repeat that mistake.
Okay. Might as well stay there because you're the next one also.
Awesome.
Any questions about this one? Okay, Budget Amendment 1904, to add $10,913 for library cabinet upgrades to the library office storage areas. This is put forth by Alder Group B.
So this project will be looking at the back workroom of the library. If you go up the stairs and you're looking at the desk, and to your right you'll see an opening, and that's where a lot of the shelvers and the library assistants do a lot of the processing and checking books in and checking books out. And along the back wall you'll notice 4 cabinets mounted to the wall, 4 cabinets on the bottom, and then there's one end cabinet that you can see part of. And those are original to the addition of the library. So they're about 15-ish years old. They're breaking down already. Some of the doors have fallen off. Some of the doors don't close and lock. And they're rather unsightly. And the way the building is arranged too, that you can see them from the public. The main purpose of this is to refresh that, but also to make sure that those cabinets back there in our main workroom work properly, that the doors close, and that some of them can properly lock in place.
Questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, you're good. The final amendment is number 5, to add $75,000 for the Capital City Bike Trail put forth by Alders Wood and Group E. I think Dan's going to talk about that.
This would be $75,000 to close the connection from the sidewalk on Southtown, going south across the tracks to the Capital City Bike Trail, roughly 180 feet or so. A few of you may have biked this area in the past, but I believe there's a narrowing of the road where the railroad tracks is. So the bikes pretty much are going out into the traffic lanes to get back to the trail. The work that would be included would be installing a culvert for the storm sewer, filling in some bedding material to complete the path, and concrete where the tracks are, and an asphalt path connecting everything through there. So the $75,000 would get you some engineering, the design work, and then construction as well.
Any questions, or Alderwood, did you want
Just,
to add anything?
brief comment. I mean, this project would complete the missing link that's exists in the connectivity for the bike trail right now, and in particular, a missing link in a dangerous place where there's a railroad crossing. So it's something that's been talked about as long back as when Walmart was first built.
Anyone else? Alder Group E?
I guess I'll just also add that we received a number of citizen letters of support for this project, and I think it's been on a lot of residents' minds, so.
A lot of Madison residents' minds.
Bikers minds.
Bikers.
Bikers' minds, yes. Anything else?
That rabble rouser,
Peter
former Alder,
McKeever, yeah.
Peter McKeever.
Yeah.
Spread the word. So.
Anything else? Chad?
I'll just add that, excuse me, the new trail out through McFarland adds some, I don't want to say urgency, but I think the volume of biker traffic through this corridor is increasing as a result of that popular trail. So
I think, yeah, that's been mentioned, that it's, would help with that, so. Anything else? Okay, well, we will be voting on all these at our next meeting. So thank you, Dan. On to the next item.
I had
For Doug?
a question or two on the capital budget overall. One actually specific thing that I just noticed and missed previously, that there had been a $1,200 project from landmarks for historical markers that was moved to 2020. That's the marker that's proposed to go in on North Monona Drive for the Rindall Mound. So I'm not sure if we're in the process of getting the plaque. We haven't ordered anything, obviously, yet, but working on the language and so forth.
Do you remember that, Mark? I thought we were asked to move that back a year.
Yeah. I think we were to move back just because we didn't have anybody with Sonny gone, that position gone, so we moved it back a year.
Yeah, I don't think we need Sonny here to do it. Rick Bernstein at the Historical works, who's on Landmarks Commission, works there at the Historical Society. We've got a subcommittee who are coming up with the wording to put on the plaque, and so Rick had gotten that cost, and then it would be, we'd still need to also relocate the existing boulder that we have from the previous marker when it was for the Rindall House itself, that's now at Public Works. Move that and attach this new plaque to it, but the plan was definitely still to do it next year.
Well, I would recommend, and if you don't add it, is either, because we have a $30,000 for building included in there, or we will have leftover money from this year's budget to pay for it.
Rather than borrowing for it.
Yeah.
Okay, I just don't want to
Right, right.
You know, if we don't put it back in, then when, well, I
Just
guess
make a
it's a small
notation.
enough amount that you'd be able to.
Right.
cover the
Typically, we try
administrative-
not to borrow for under 5,000.
Right.
Well, it's not so much a question of if we're gonna borrow for it, but it's a capital project, because it's
Right.
gonna last more than whatever the 5 years or whatever the guideline is.
That'd be my recommendation. We'll have funds left over from this year from the building. We'll have basically
As
a
long
couple
as-
$1,000s there, so.
So when that, and that's a small enough.
Put it back in
amount-
under other revenues or
We
something?
could do that.
Do you want us to do that?
What's that?
Put it back in and put the funding under other revenues?
Sure,
We would need a budget amendment.
yeah. It is a small enough amount, as long as the funding is there. Well, that still needs to be in the budget.
Right.
Yeah, I think we need an amendment, because otherwise, I was gonna say the administrator could spend $1,200, but
Right.
for a project that's not in the budget, I don't think they really can.
Right. So it'd be just as easier just to
Yeah,
prove it through this process.
Okay.
and I guess then related, this is the other landmarks project that was in the 2018 budget was $10,000 for the pagoda engineering or architecture services, and that hasn't been, that's not gonna happen now until 2019.
That would be carried over.
We don't need to have a line item in here.
No.
Okay,
Since it's already been approved.
so make sure.
Sorry.
Alder Kitzler.
Mark, can you, since I just found this out tonight, can you explain a little bit about the Riverfront Park construction and the other, what's included in the other revenues?
Yeah. I'm in book here. So the other, so there's 385,000 is for the riverfront. 196,500 is other revenue. All that number was determined. Do what page it's on?
It's on 71, and then 73 is the breakdown.
So basically 385,000, how we split that was, what was the other revenue was half of 210,000 for the portable ice sheet and equipment. Half of that was considered through the general obligation, half that's considered other revenue. Based on sponsorships, we'll be asked to pay for that. The other one is public art for 50,000. That was the other part that's been paid for, was planned to be by either donation.
Or grant.
Or grants, yep. And the B-cycle was the other amount that made up the 196,000 to be paid by other revenue. So right now, stuff that would be covered by the general obligation would be the storage racks, security system, audio system, Wi-Fi, and then half of the ice skate.
No, I appreciate it. It's just something I didn't
Yeah,
catch
probably should have broken
originally.
that out in more
So,
detail.
yeah.
Correct.
Alder Group B, did you have a question? Anyone else? Doug?
Just one. Mark, I think you said at the last meeting that we were, that's proposed to use some amount of the working capital reserve or fund reserve or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And here, is that, is it 200,000?
Yeah.
Does it, where's, is it shown somewhere or?
Yeah, if you go to page 1. Page 1, you see 2019, there's the expenditures and there's the revenues. So general
Oh, there it is.
bond
Yeah.
proceeds is the 3.4, and then underneath that is the fund balance being used.
Probably where it says fund balance, that would be where the fund balance number is. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. We will move on to item 2C, consideration of resolution 18-10-2299, approving the release of a sanitary sewer easement at 6809 Mangrove Lane. This is put forth by the Plan Commission. This is their, well, no, this isn't a motion to approve, it's first read.
Yes, so as part of the part of this feral equipment, they needed an easement. This has been approved to release the easement by the Public Works and approved by the Planning Commission. I guess unfortunately,
We-
Dan was going to stayed, once he left.
Dan did leave. Apparently, he didn't just step out or anything.
Yeah. So if we want to wait, he was,
I mean, I could speak to it, I guess.
Sure.
So basically, this easement existed because of the fact that we have, separate lots here. And with Feral Equipment essentially taking over that lot, the easement is no longer needed. It's just simply in the event you have different owners occupying different parcels, obviously there's a need for potential access for future underground services. But now, if they were to need those things, they would connect to their own building because they're the same owner of the properties.
Okay.
So that's the logic behind this.
Any questions?
But, yeah, I do. But it's the city surrendering the easement. And I
That's
just want to
correct.
make sure, and I guess that's why I'd rather wait till Dan was here to,
And we won't be
Answer.
voting on it tonight.
yeah, it's just to make sure that before we give up an easement, that we're really sure we don't need it or won't need it in the future. Because, we've got it now and surrender it and then it's gone forever, so.
Yes, if you could make sure
yeah.
Dan is here for the next meeting. Well, let's move on to item D, consideration of resolution 18-10-2300, approval of a two-lot certified survey map, CSM for Feral Equipment and Supply, also put forth by Plan Commission. This is something you can address, Mark?
Yeah, so, fair equipment, they needed a CSM done. This too, it went to the Public Works Committee and the Planning Commission, were both approved by both committees. That's all I got on that. Again, I should have Dan, if you have something to add on that.
Do you know anything about this, Chad?
Well,
It's the
I mean,
same parcel.
Same parcel.
Yeah.
I'll have Dan here at the next meeting.
yeah, it's a similar situation.
Okay.
I mean, they're looking to, they're making improvements in the second lot, and so they're looking to combine them, and that both is driving the release of that easement and the new use of this lot and redevelopment of it. So we reviewed it at the Plan Commission, and we're satisfied with the plans.
And if I may, this CSM doesn't show that easement, so that's
Correct.
just to
Yeah, I'll have him here.
directly connected.
All right, we will discuss that further and vote on it at our next meeting. Item 2E, consideration of resolution 18-10-2301, approval of participation in a Wisconsin Bureau of Transportation Safety Grant titled 2019 Capital Area OWI Task Force, put forth by the police chief, and this is starred for immediate approval.
Move to take this item out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Kurt?
All right, we're looking for approval to participate in the 2019 Capital Area OWI Task Force. The grant would start soon and run through September 30th of 2019. This is a partnership grant with 7 local communities. I administer this grant, and I track all of the results, payroll. We receive 1 check from the state and then pay the partner agencies out of that. Our portion of that is $12,000. That is for overtime enforcement efforts. The grant has a 25% match. It's a soft match, and the $3,000 would come from officer benefits, fuel mileage expenses, and on-duty traffic efforts. As an OWI grant, the hours are limited to 6 p.m. to 4:30 a.m., and the $12,000 from Monona yields approximately 5 to 6 4-hour blocks of enforcement each month.
Any questions? Mark?
Just one thing, This is budgeted in our 2018 budget. We do budget for these grants, and we budget for the overtime grant, for the overtime and for the revenue. And we will be budgeting the same in 2019, so we do account for this in our budgeting process.
Anyone? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item 2F, consideration of resolution 18-10-2302, approval of participation in a Wisconsin Bureau of Transportation Safety Grant titled 2019 Dane Suburban Seatbelt Task Force, also put forth by the police chief, also started for immediate action.
Move to take this item out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay.
All right, the second grant is a seatbelt enforcement grant. This is a countywide grant administered by the Town of Madison PD. The Monona portion is $15,840 for overtime enforcement. There's again a 25% soft match, $3,960, again made up from officer benefits, mileage, and fuel expenses, and on-duty traffic efforts. This is done any day of the week, and the $15,840 yields about 8 4-hour deployments each month of the grant. The grant also runs October 16th through September 30th of 2019.
Questions? Alder Groupie?
So with both of these, there's a short-term objective, but once the grant runs out, what is the long-term objective as far as what data and results you yield from these short-term projects?
I'm not sure I follow you.
So this says, for example, the primary objective is to increase safety belt usage, decrease the severity of crash injuries due to a lack of safety belt within the city of Monona. And then what will you do once you have completed this grant in September of 2019? What's the long-term objective?
The state looks at our crash rates and seatbelt usage statistics and allocates money statewide based on that. So the OWI grant is targeted to OWI. The seatbelt is targeted for seatbelt enforcement, but it also looks at any violation that occurs in front of us. So it's not like you're ignoring speeders or anything during a seatbelt grant. And then the state just tallies our efforts, and we attempt to lower the percentages of the lack of seatbelt use and OWIs that occur.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item is 2G, consideration of resolution 18-10-2303, calling on the governor and state legislature to adequately fund Wisconsin's transportation system, put forth by myself. This is something that the League of Wisconsin Municipalities has asked each municipality to approve and forward on to the governor. This is one of their big objectives for the year, is doing something to improve local road funding, which, as we've all been hearing, has been in pretty rough shape from the state for several years now. So this is just first read. We'll vote on it next time. Does anybody have any questions?
Is there any reason not to vote on it tonight? We anticipate the
No.
funding is going to get better in the next 2 weeks.
If you'd like to take it out of order and vote on it tonight?
I'll move to suspend the rules, take this out of order.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Move approval.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. And our final item, H, convene in closed session under Wisconsin statute section 19.85, paren 1, paren E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. And this is involving a discussion of a potential future facility site land acquisition. So we need a roll call, a motion and a roll call to go into closed session.
I move to go into closed session.
Second.
Joan, could you call the roll?
Alder Kitzler?
Aye.
Alder Brewer?
Aye.
Alder Groupie?
Aye.
Alder Moore?
Aye.
Alder Spate?
Aye.
Alder Wood?
Aye.
Okay, we're in closed session. Yes, we are back in session. Next item is report of committees, commissions, boards, et cetera. Alder Group B.
The Friends of the Monona Public Library annual book sale was yesterday and was a huge success. Well attended, well organized, and I got my $5 bag of books, so
Oh, good.
great time.
Alder Moore.
Nothing to report.
Alder Spate.
No report.
Alder Wood.
The Ped Bike Committee had a second public information meeting last Wednesday. I think most of you were there, many of you anyway, so I thought it went pretty well. I liked there was I think a better give and take after the presentations. And the next meeting is scheduled for November 1st to look at a draft of the specific recommendations. Hopefully we'll vote on that and I think get that out. I'd like to put the report out for public comment for 30 days before it gets adopted, so that may push
24th and 29th.
that may push the adoption of the actual plan into January. So,
And it's November 1st, not
Yes.
October 30th? I know I
right.
thought October 30th.
Well, that was the date we had originally talked about, and that didn't work for Strand, I think. I don't remember.
Okay. Alder Kitzler.
No report?
Alder Coor.
No report.
All right. City Clerk.
Um,
Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to let everyone know, there is a publication regarding this by in-person absentee voting at City Hall will be begin on October 8th and end on November 2nd. City Hall is open Monday through Friday from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and ballots will be available.
City Administrator Hotaker.
Yeah, just to give you a quick update, we are working on the operating budgets, putting those together. We'll eventually have a committee of the whole, 24th and the 29th of October. That's all I have.
Okay. I guess next thing up is appointments. Becca Reynolds to the Community Media Committee, effective immediately through May 21st, and Tom Evans to Parks and Rec Board, effective immediately through May 2019. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Appointments are approved. Then I also wanted to announce that applications for city administrator were due yesterday, and we'll be meeting to go through those shortly. I'm appointing a search committee which will include the Finance and Personnel Committee, Alder Wood and Alder Kitzler. It will also include Sue Carr, Ann Timon of Monona Bank, former Alder Jim Bussey, and myself, and we will be reviewing the applications, and Lee and I have worked out a process for this. We'll be reviewing them and then probably narrowing them down to a group of, I can't remember exactly how many, somewhere between 5 and 10, hopefully, and then council will be involved in the interview process going forward. So we'll keep you posted on that. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Somebody.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.